A friend of mine recently asked me the good old million-dollar question. How do you decide on pricing your work? When I received this question, I recognized that I haven't sufficiently addressed this topic, so let's talk about it. Pricing is a complex subject, and I don't claim to have all the solutions, since every project is unique and every client is unique. Each quote is tailored, and the terms of service always keep adapting to meet the current circumstances. And while I discuss this in theoretical terms, applying it in practice can be challenging. Nonetheless, it is an important goal to aim for. Now, I'll do my best to give you my take on it. But first, if you haven't already, I highly recommend watching my video on the 3D Symposium presentation that I did in Madrid a while back. It is available on my Patreon page under the Philosophy and Business collection. In that video, I discuss what I believe is essential for succeeding as a freelancer. I talk about the critical distinction between being just another 3D artist and being a consultant, and how to position yourself as a trusted advisor to your clients. And what I share in that video really forms the foundation of the approach to pricing that I'm about to discuss here. So first I want to talk about the problem with hourly rates. Because in our industry, the go-to strategy for many is to set an hourly rate. It is the default, the expected way to work. And almost every time a client reaches out to me, not far into the conversation, they pop the most anticipated and tiresome question: what is your hourly rate? And that's when I say, go f***. And every time I hear that question, I think to myself, oh boy, here we go again. Because when a client asks for my hourly rate, I know that I'm about to embark on a delicate dance where I need to somehow carefully diverge from that topic because hourly rates are stupid. You see, I've been in the 3D industry for 17 years now. I registered my own company in 2011. And I have been freelancing ever since. So that is 13 years, almost 13 years, perfecting my craft, honing my skills, and optimizing my workflow. All with one goal in mind, and that is to work as fast and as efficiently as I possibly can. Why? Well, obviously, because as a freelancer, the old saying, time is money, really is a rule to live by. And I don't want to waste more time on a project than necessary, and I definitely don't want to be pulling all-nighters to meet some impossible deadline by a client who thinks that creating high-quality 3D is as simple as just, pressing some buttons, make the magic render button. So I've invested countless hours and money into perfecting my workflows, mastering my crafts, studying images, understanding not only realism and light and materials, but also the psychology of what makes a good image in the first place. I've been writing custom scripts and I've been buying plugins that turbocharge my productivity, and on top of that, I've spent years investing in and building a top-notch model library filled with high-quality assets that let me decorate an ArchViz project in basically no time. In behavioral economics, we learn that our buying behavior is driven by emotion rather than rational thinking. Therefore, there's a huge difference between creating a technically good image and an image that sells through invoking the audience's emotion. Now, my clients usually like me because I have an eye for good lighting and composition, whatever that means. But what they often don't think about is that I wasn't born with that skill. It's something that I've been developing over many, many years. So all these investments in money and time mean that I can deliver projects that are not only better in quality than many of my competitors, but also completed in half the time, sometimes, maybe even faster. So let me ask you, is it fair to me if a client pays me less just because I can do the job faster? In any other field, you would pay more for faster delivery. Order something on Amazon, pay more for express delivery. You want to skip the long queues in the airport? Well, pay more to get into the express line. But in our industry, with the logic of hourly rates, doing the job faster means getting paid less. So should I be punished for being able to work faster, for having spent most of my life perfecting my craft? Well, of course not. So how do I deal with this? Simple. I triple my hourly rates to reflect the increased quality and efficiency. But here's the kicker. What do you think happens when I tell a client that I charge $500 per hour? They will disappear faster than donuts in an American police station, and I don't even get the chance to make them understand why that price is actually totally justified. So that brings us to value-based pricing. Now this means that you will charge what the project is worth to the client and not to you. Or imagine this scenario. You are asked to create some high quality renders of an iPhone. The project will take 50 hours and your standard rate is, let's say, $100. So to you, the project is valued $5,000. Now picture this project being for your brother's small local repair shop located in a small town with 900 inhabitants. Would a $5,000 investment make sense to him? No, probably not. It would take him years before that investment had paid itself off. But now let's shift the client to Apple, intending to use your renders to boost sales of their latest iPhone worldwide. Suddenly, the same project is worth millions. It is the same effort, the same project, same amount of hours, yet the context changes everything. Now let me paraphrase Chris Do. One of them you would do for $1 million, the other one you would do for a sandwich. In other words, how many hours it takes for you to produce it is completely insignificant. You get paid for the value, not for your time. Chris Do made a great point when he was talking about the Nike logo. How many hours does it take to design their logo? Probably not very many. And ignoring the whole idea and brainstorming phase behind their logo, actually producing it in Adobe Illustrator takes no more than, 1 minute? And anyone can do it. But how much is the Nike logo worth? Millions and millions of dollars. By the way, if you haven't already, I really urge you to check out Chris Do's YouTube channel. There's loads of great knowledge being shared. Having established the correct pricing strategy, we are facing not only one, but two problems. So problem number one is the hourly rate question. When a client asks about hourly rates, they're painting us into a corner. Explaining our value-based approach might be dangerous because directly discussing the strategy with the client can be off-putting as it appears like we are trying to maximize our profit at their expense. So it is a delicate balance to maintain, as our clients naturally aim to minimize cost and encourage competitive bidding between us, you and me, the freelancers or studios. So in simpler terms, just as our strategy is to have them disclose their maximum budget, their strategy is to have us reveal our minimum amount of work that we're willing to work for. And they often do that by playing as freelancers or studios against each other. So it is crucial to be well prepared for questions about your hourly rate when it comes and to have a confident response ready. If you hesitate and go like, without knowing how to answer, it will cause you a lot of stress and may result in that you hastily providing a stupid hourly rate that you now have to stick with, or simply just losing control over the conversation. Either way, it is likely resulting in that you just ruined all your chances of getting paid the real value of your work. Problem number two, understanding the value to the client. It is usually a bad idea, not always, but often, to ask them what the maximum amount they're willing to pay is. Again, clients don't appreciate when you're trying to upsell them to maximize your own profit. And to have them disclose their budget without directly asking for it before you are forced to answer their question about your rates is incredibly difficult. There's only so much time you can avoid the question before it gets awkward, and at some point they will catch on to what you're doing and they will lose interest in you. But remember, you don't want to stress this, because the second you give them a price, you will never know if they would have been prepared to pay more. So how do you achieve this? Well, this is where adopting the role of a consultant becomes essential. As I spoke about in the 3D Symposium presentation, being a consultant means that you collaborate closely with the client, not just working for them, but actively engaging with their mission, with their product, with their core values. And by applying strategies that I discussed in that video, you position yourself as a key contributor to their sales and their revenue growth. And this is essential. Successfully doing so helps you establish a deep trust with the client, a trust that becomes invaluable during pricing negotiations. Again, you will have to be deeply involved in helping their business succeed. So what you need to do is value assessment through strategic inquiry. So let's take an example. You are making an Archviz project, and asking the right questions can help you ascertain the project's worth. So for example, type and scale of the project. Is it a single family house or a multi-family building, in other words, apartments? Ironically, even though apartments are generally sold for less than houses, they often present higher value to the real estate developers due to higher volume sales. A house is sold to one family, but an apartment building can be sold to 20 families, but doesn't necessarily cost 20 times more to build. Repetitive use. Is the building meant to be constructed only once, or to be replicated across multiple sites, because repeated use of your images obviously increase their value. Target audience. Now, who are the prospective buyers? Projects targeting families in their late 30s and higher can justify higher rates due to greater financial stakes. These buyers are often married, and thus they have two incomes, and they often have kids, so they're willing to spend more on a bigger apartment. One thing to note regarding the target audience though, it isn't always necessarily true that upper class citizens are worth more as a buyer than middle class citizens. Because upper class buyers, they want luxury, and while luxury homes are always way more expensive to buy, they're also way more expensive to build. So to the real estate developer, it isn't necessarily worth more. Just something to keep in mind. Location. A project in a high-value urban area is simply worth more than one in a rural setting. So these are just a few examples of questions that will give you a clearer insight into how valuable your image will be to the client and how you can adjust the price accordingly. Moreover, if you pose these questions after you've firmly established yourself as a consultant, the risk that the client will perceive your questions as profit-maximizing tactics is substantially lower. I was once taught a valuable lesson. You need to set your rates high. They should be so high that you're embarrassed to share them, and the clients almost fall off their chair when you tell them. But you also need to have thoroughly convinced them that your service is the best option. I have an analogy. Imagine that you are at Home Depot or something, and you're buying a cheap electric screwdriver. It doesn't cost too much, but soon after using it, you find it underpowered, the battery doesn't last as long as promised, and it breaks down just after a few uses. So though it was cheap, you will regret the purchase because it failed to meet your expectations. And you will miss the money you spent on it. It was a bad investment. Now, your wallet isn't suffering, it wasn't a lot of money, but your rational thinking is, your soul is suffering. If you invest in the most expensive screwdriver, swiping your card in the checkout might be painful, and you might leave the store feeling uneasy about how much money you spent. However, when it performs flawlessly, time and again, year after year, you realize that you got exactly what you paid for. This investment proved its worth, and you will not miss the money you spent on it. It might have hurt your wallet at the time, but your soul is satisfied. Now, isn't that ironic? Spending less can lead to regret and a sense of loss, while investing more, though initially daunting, can result in satisfaction and perceived value. And this is precisely the lesson was all about. Clients might be put off at the higher price initially, but once they see the value it brings, they will understand it was the best investment they could have made, and they won't regret the expense. To successfully adopt this approach, it is crucial to establish that you are more than just another 3D artist. You are a consultant willing to invest your time and your energy into their project's success. However, very important, there's a vital requirement for this strategy to be effective in the long term because, you do want the client to come back, right? Your work must meet their expectations. You cannot simply persuade them to spend more. You also have to deliver results that justify their higher investment. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your images must be better than everyone else's. In fact, they can be worse and still meet the expected higher value. So how is that possible, you may ask? Well, sometimes all it takes is just that you invest your time and energy into their cause and that you go the extra mile to make them happy. Are they paying twice as much as you would have otherwise charged if you were doing the hourly rates? Well, then include some extra revisions or throw in a few extra close-up renders of their project or some other bonus content that they didn't ask for. And when your images are delivered, mail them a handwritten thank you note together with a box of chocolate. All it takes, really, is to make them feel like they are being taken care of. The actual quality of the image you deliver are almost always secondary. You don't need to be the best, you just need to do the best. A few years ago, I sat down with a business advisor to discuss my approach about pricing. And with a sense of pride, I shared that I had never lost a bid. To me, this success meant I was excelling. My clients always chose me over my competition, readily accepting any price I set. And this seemed to indicate that they truly value my work. However, the advisor's reaction was a bit unexpected. He laughed and straight up told me that I'm doing everything wrong. Confused, I listened as he explained that by consistently winning bids without negotiation, I was doubtlessly underpricing my services. So if a client always agreed with your prices without hesitation, you could have charged more, probably a lot more. And this is a rule without exception. After all, what are the chances that you just happened to hit their maximum budget? That's next to none. I have a golf analogy to make. In golf, the aim is to get the ball into the hole with as few strokes as possible. Then would the best strategy be to cautiously undershooting, approaching the goal bit by bit? Well, certainly not. That would give you a terrible score. A better strategy would be to hit the ball hard, overshoot the flag, and then, if you are fairly close to the hole, you can just use the putter to easily steer the ball back into the hole. A big difference here is that in golf, if you didn't hit the ball far enough, you can take another swing at it. In pricing, however, you only get one chance, because once you have given a price they have accepted, you can never raise it. You only get one shot to set the right price. So the advice that I can give is first do some research on the client to get an understanding of what the project may be worth to them. This is something that most freelancers miss to do. They just don't research their clients. And then aim high. Set your initial quote above what you think the client might be willing to pay. And this isn't just about testing their limits, it's about establishing a starting point for negotiation. I can yet again recommend the book Confessions of a Pricing Man by Hermann Simon. He talks about the psychology of anchoring, which is pretty much what we're doing here. But I'll admit, it is incredibly uncomfortable to approach pricing this boldly. However, there have been several occasions where, to my surprise, clients have still accepted the price without negotiation, leaving me astounded at what they're actually willing to pay. So after experiencing this a few times, I came to realize that I had been undervaluing my own work for basically most of my career. And the reason to why I was buried in work at times wasn't necessarily because everyone wanted to work with me specifically, but because I was underestimating the value of my work to them. So this actually happened a few weeks ago, where Martin and I, as per the client request, were quoting two options for a project. One cheaper and one more expensive, because the client didn't know whether they could actually afford the more expensive one that they really wanted, so they asked for a cheaper version to maybe choose from. Now, without hesitation, they decided not to just buy the more expensive option, but they bought both of them. When clients react to a high quote, it opens the door for dialogue. You can then adjust your pricing down to a level that they're comfortable with without ever having to compromise below your own worth. This approach not only helps in finding the true value of what the clients are willing to pay, but also, in theory, at least, ensures that you are not underselling your services. But like I just mentioned, even though you think you overshoot their budget, you might actually find that you are still underestimating it. So now you might be thinking, but Jojo, isn't this risky? What if I lose the client to another studio that underbid my high quote? Well, yes, that is a possibility, especially if you didn't get the chance to have a dialogue with the client, because sometimes after your high quote was sent, they'll just ghost you. But when you lose a bid due to a high pricing, you should consider two things. One, your value proposition. If a client chooses another provider, it could mean that you haven't fully convinced them of your value to them. This is a critical area for improvement, focusing on demonstrating how your services surpass simply fulfilling the brief. Being a true consultant means not only that you will do what the client tells you to do, but that the client will do what you suggest them to. Establishing the consultancy role means that they listen to you because you are the expert, not the other way around. And two, client priorities. If a client is looking only for the cheapest option, they may not be the ideal partner for a long-term engagement to you anyway. Such clients can often be more trouble than they're actually worth, demanding more while paying less. In these cases, the decision to go with a cheaper option might actually be a blessing in disguise for you, saving you from potential headaches and resource drains. One key insight from my 13 years of freelancing is that clients who pay the least often demand the most. They tend to request more revisions while not appreciating the value of your work, and the revisions they request are often stupid or unfounded. They just change things for the sake of changing things and not because it actually made any difference to the end result. So on the contrary, Clients who are willing to pay more usually have a better understanding of their market and the value of expert services. They tend to trust your professionalism more, and they won't actually interfere as much with your work. So therefore, adopting a strategy that starts with higher quotes is an effective way to distinguish between less desirable clients and those who are truly beneficial to your business. Clients who recognize and are willing to pay for quality, and I'm not talking just about image quality, but in quality of service, not only contribute to your financial success, but they're also more likely to respect your expertise and time, leading to a healthier working relationship and prevent you from burning yourself out. So are there times where this high quoting strategy might not be worth your time and effort? Well, absolutely. For smaller projects, you might already sense that there's a limited financial flexibility, and this is something that you learn to recognize with experience. For projects that are clearly less extensive, where you can already determine in advance that there isn't much leeway in the budget, or if the client just themselves say that they have a limited budget, I usually ask outright what the budget is, because at this stage, there is simply no point in playing games. I'll explain to the client that it doesn't make any sense for me to spend a lot of time making a quote for you for the quality that I want to deliver if they don't have the budget for it anyway. If I decide to take on a client with an obvious tight budget, I have found an effective approach to clarify the range of possibilities up front. However, when they ask for a cost, I will still refuse the hourly rate because instead insist on a project budget. So I'll tell them I can do images for $500, I can do it for $50,000. The question is about where you, meaning the client, set the bar in terms of quality and effort. So if you, the client, provide me with your budget, I can return to you with quotation and some sample images to show what you can expect for the money you have. Following that, it's almost certain they will ask, but what do you typically charge for this type of project? And in response, I may provide an average price based on, again, my research of the client and their expected standards. Again, this is still very important. And I might also make it clear that if necessary, I can lower the cost by simplifying the quality and cutting some corners. This approach helps set clear expectations and opens up the door for an honest dialogue about what they can realistically afford versus what they actually wish to achieve. However, it is crucial to note that I'll only adopt this strategy for projects that I genuinely want to take on and believe that are worth my time. I am extremely cautious about not committing to any projects that would negatively affect me, whether economically or psychologically or both. So how do you determine which of these two strategies you should resort to? An overshooting quotation or asking for their budget? Well, the bigger the client is, the more likely it is that they have money, thus making it worth doing the pricing dance. How to determine this, however, is hard to tell, but it will come with experience. Just do what you think makes sense. I mean, after all, 13 years of freelancing and I still get it wrong sometimes. It's a never-ending learning process. So regardless of what pricing strategy you are adopting and what type of client you're dealing with, always clarify expectations. It is crucial. Like mentioned, I typically provide a quote, accompanied with example images that illustrate what the client can expect from my deliveries in terms of visual quality. And if the budget is relatively low, I specify which aspects have been scaled back in order to fit their budget so they have full clarity. And this hopefully, not always, but hopefully prevents misunderstandings later on, ensuring clients are aware from the start which details that are not included. Very important, your quotations should not only state what is included, but it should also state what is not included. It is also very important that the terms in my quotation or contract specifically say that I promise to deliver the best work possible based on the conditions provided by the client. Therefore, if the material I receive from the client are substandard or they change during the course of the project, that can lead to additional costs for extra work that was not foreseeable when I made the quote. After every completed project, this is really hard, but after every completed project, it is crucial to conduct a thorough evaluation to understand what went wrong and how can you adjust your terms in the contract to avoid similar pitfalls in the future. I have an example. I was working for a very big Swedish clothing company, and when the project was done, I made statistics. 70% of all the time I spent on the project was revisions. So that was everything that happened after my first draft. Something to keep in mind when doing your quote. It always takes more time than you think. With all this being said, this is an incredibly complex and delicate topic. It is nearly impossible to implement this perfectly in reality at all times. You will get it wrong, just as I'm getting it wrong, but having this in the back of your mind will make it easier for you to increase your prices. One thing is absolutely certain. In many cases, your work is worth more to the client than what you think it is.